now. Welcome everyone to Cando's presentation of NRCan's mining opportunities for Alberta. My name is Paul Macedo, Communications Director with Cando.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Carmel Nepus. I am Cando's Certification Coordinator. I'd like to thank you all for joining us. And I just wanted to go over a few things. This session will be recorded. And if you do have any questions, please feel free to use the chat box and we will answer them at a later time. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with Cando, we are a non-for-profit Indigenous organization that is membership driven. And we focus on community economic development and are constantly looking for new and innovative ways to offer training opportunities and capacity development to First Nations across Canada. This webinar is funded by Natural Resource Canada. And I just want to check to see if our guest speaker has logged on. Keith, are you with us? Okay, so another thing too, I just wanted to say is that this session, it will be available afterwards and we'll send a follow-up email. And there will also be a survey link available. So at the end of the week, everybody who has participated in the survey will be entered into a draw to win $400. We'll pick 2 winners. I have everything here. Okay, since our guest speaker is not logged on, I'm just going to go ahead and introduce our main speaker, Dave Lefeber. Dave has more than 30 years of experience with government geoscience surveys and mineral exploration companies. An economic geologist, he is knowledgeable about a wide variety of minerals, industrial minerals, and coal deposits. So Dave, would you like to join us and introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks. Yes, again, my name is Dave Lefeber, and I appreciate this chance to speak to you about mining and mineral exploration with respect particularly to Alberta. I live on Salt Spring Island and near Vancouver Island in British Columbia. So, and I'm speaking to you from the ancestral and unceded territory of the Salish peoples and of the Huquilindum and Sinakotan speaking First Nations in British Columbia. And I will just get the presentation going, and I will just hook myself up to my headphones so that you can hear me clearly. We will have chances for questions at both partway through and at the end of this presentation. We would like you, if you have a question, type it into the chat box so that that it can be captured, and then one of the 2 coordinators from Cando will read it out to me and I'll answer it. You can choose to put your name on that, or you can just remain anonymous if you wish. So hopefully now you can hear me clearly, and I just need to get my presentation up here. I should acknowledge that, let's just see, that looks like what I want. And so we're going to be talking about mining equals opportunity for Indigenous communities in Alberta. And that might be a bit of a surprise to some people, because we think of Alberta, and in terms of extractive industries, we think of oil and gas. And in fact, there is actually quite a significant mining sector in Alberta, and I'm going to try and give you an overview of that. I'm also, while I'm going through it, going to try and introduce you to opportunities for Indigenous entrepreneurs and companies and communities to benefit from mining in Alberta. Let's see. Okay. Certainly I will be trying to give you some insights into this unique sector as well. you can think about it, it's like forestry in some ways. It's a natural resource sector, but you can count the trees. And that's a tremendous advantage in terms of knowing where to find and how to extract the resource. It's like the technology industry, which might surprise you, but it's a very high risk sector because you don't know where the deposits are. And you often can be working in challenging or remote environments. There's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of risk associated with it. So that controls a lot of the way that the industry works. It's also quite different than the oil and gas sector. And obviously we're talking about Alberta, where that's a very strong sector. It is an extractive industry, but I think I'll show you today why it's quite a bit different. We're going to go through the opportunities, and I'm going to go through that fairly quickly for mining jobs, businesses, and agreements in Alberta for Indigenous communities and businesses. Then we'll have a question and answer session. And so, and feel free to enter those questions at any time. And then I'm going to go through a life cycle of mining related to Alberta with potential economic opportunities for Indigenous communities. And one of the things that might surprise you, and I'm not sure if you can sort of see this with sort of the lighting we have in here, so I've got to get it in the right location. And guess what this is? It's a big diamond, but it's actually a glass diamond. But it's a precursor. This is telling you that Alberta has a very significant opportunity in the future to open its first diamond mine. It's going to take quite a bit more exploration, and it's going to take some luck and some risk capital to find a new mine. But remember that we're going to be talking later on about the potential for diamonds and for other minerals in Alberta. And then we're going to end with a few key points that I think are relevant to economic development officers related to mining. And then we'll have another question and answer session at the end. If we can't answer all your questions, then you can communicate with me by email to get an answer later. And there's the use the chat box. You don't have to mention your name. You can mention if you wish, but it's not required. So 4 reasons why we want to talk about mining opportunities: jobs, contracts. Mining is the #2 employer of Indigenous peoples in Canada. Guess who's first? Governments, thinking the federal government. And so #2 is mining. And that's because mining is, as we'll see, is widely distributed, and it also occurs in many remote areas where there's maybe not anything other than forestry as a major industrial sector, or maybe not even forestry if you're further north in Canada. There are numerous agreements with Indigenous communities, and they have potential for significant benefits. This is something that's been relatively recent and much appreciated. Mines are spread across much of Alberta. I think many of the people in the audience may not perhaps realize that, and it's in rural and suburban locations. So there's probably a mine in a broader context, like a sand and gravel pit, that's actually not that far away from where you live. And perhaps the 4th thing is, well, the mining sector is not well known. And that's what we're trying to address today. You don't want to miss these economic development opportunities. You don't have to take advantage of them, but you do want to be aware as an economic development officer that there is the potential for mining economic development related to Alberta. Indigenous employment in Alberta mines, if we think about that, about 12% of the industry's labor force is Indigenous peoples for mining across Canada. This is up from 8% in 2011, and it compares with an all industry average across Canada of just 4% Indigenous workers. And this is in part because the companies running the mines are trying to employ local people, and in particular, they're trying to employ Indigenous people. We should also remember, for every job at a mine, there's usually at least 2 jobs. Some people would say 2 to 3 jobs in the mining supply and service sector. So these are contractors, people supplying goods that relate to it. So that means that there's over 12,000 jobs related to mining in Alberta. That's in Alberta. There's in some other jurisdictions where mining is more prominent, those numbers are much higher. These can be quite attractive jobs because they can really build work skills. Usually when you work at a sort of larger mine or a larger operation, there's a chance to start in a more of an entry-level position and then acquire skills. Or if you have a particular skill like myself, I'm a geologist. Note, I'm not sure if you can see it, but I have my hand lens here. It's sort of like a stethoscope for a doctor, it's sort of, when I go out in the field, that's one of my key tools. And it has been for geologists for decades and decades. Well, so you might come in to work at a mine at one level, but then you can migrate to another. And these jobs are in many regions in Alberta, which can make it attractive to some communities. You can see in that pie chart, that's Alberta's GDP for 2013. Energy and mining make up more than a quarter of the province's GDP. Now, of course, energy is significantly bigger than mining, but it still does mean that mining is a very significant, as you'll see. So let's talk about the wide variety of jobs there. And this is just some pictures to see. You can see actually the bottom picture on the right, there's a geologist, not me, another geologist holding it. And what do you see hanging down behind the rocks? His hand lens. So I know even without looking at the rocks that he's a geologist. But these jobs can be at mine sites, they can be on surface, or they can, in other jurisdictions, be underground. And some of your coal mines have had underground portions to them. But they can also be office jobs, like we can see in the upper right-hand corner there. There's too wide a variety of mine jobs to sort of discuss them in detail. You can see the slide here, and it just lists that, yeah, there's mine jobs, there's jobs in the mill and the shop. You might be a trades helper or an apprentice and getting certified for a trade there. There's office jobs. There's, if it's a remote site, there's going to be a camp that's going to require all the sort of the living support facilities. And then there's things like roads and stuff. And quite a few First Nations actually have some equipment that could actually be used in that. So if you count them all up, I come to a total of about 150 different mining jobs, more than you might have thought. If you want to get some idea of what these occupations are like, Alberta has published descriptions of different careers, which are available online. You can see the connection on the bottom there with the link for it. There's more of a variety than you thought. And you might not have thought of a chief administrator officer or an environmental auditor as being mining jobs, because sometimes our vision of mining is sort of more of heavy equipment and people who are working directly with mining the rock. You'll be glad to see that Alberta hasn't ignored you, those of you who are economic development officers, and they have a career card for you. I like the card, but I also thought you need to think, well, you want to be the early bird who gets that opportunity. You are often the first potential contact between a community or an organization and the mining sector. And so you should know something about mining. You should be aware of the opportunities, and that's obviously what we're trying to do today. As with the other industrial sectors, you can provide balanced information to your community leaders and people about mineral exploration and mining. That will be both positive aspects and also explaining how particularly larger mines are fairly large industrial operations. And so that has potential impacts on the environment. We're fortunate in Canada, we have world-leading regulations that allow regulate the mines. And so we actually have we have very safe mines, safest mines in general, or very safe mines, safest mines in the world, I would think, along with a couple other leading jurisdictions like Australia. And we have very stringent regulations on how the mine can be developed and how it will be reclaimed. And I'll be showing you some of that information later. Goods and service contracts. Well, mines require a wide variety of goods, and particularly the remote mines essentially require sort of everything, and they're looking for people to provide it. So they'll often, rather than having their own staff provide those goods, provide those services, they'll contract it out. And then I've listed some like security, which doesn't require any particular mining expertise. It requires other expertise. Environmental monitoring is the one that's very good for First Nations. So there are a variety of things there. Companies of various sizes bid on these contracts. And what we've seen over the last 4 decades is that mines are getting better at saying that they would like to contract competent local companies. And they definitely recognize the value of using Indigenous companies. And in some cases, I have an example from which I'm going to talk about British Columbia. There's actually 4 of these webinars being delivered, and I'll be talking about an example this afternoon on the British Columbia mining webinar, where because the Tahltan First Nation got an initial mining contract in their traditional territory. They were actually able to build a very large contracting company, which now does road maintenance. It does and supports other sectors besides mining. So just give you a couple examples from Alberta. So the Denny North Site Services, you can see at the bottom, they've got some construction equipment, actually a larger suite than I have a picture of. It's 100% local and Aboriginally owned, and they operate the company. They're connected to numerous First Nations communities, and they maintain a comprehensive employment program that seeks to hire and train local Aboriginal or Indigenous personnel and subcontractors and their management. Their head office is based in Chad, Alberta, southeast of Fort McMurray. One can assume that much of the work they've done has been related to the Fort McMurray area, but they would have the skill set and the equipment that could be used for mining operations elsewhere in the province and for local sand and gravel pits or mining quarries that are around Fort McMurray. Here's another example of an Indigenous service which is working predominantly at mine sites in Alberta and called White Buffalo. And you can see they provide some very specific services. And you might say, well, why wouldn't a company choose to do that? And in some cases, the company only needs it on an interim, on a bi-weekly basis or something like that, or every second day. I'm not sure how often they do the treatment. But also, so it's more efficient for them to have a contractor who also supports other sites or does other work, and they don't have to support a full-time employee and maintain the equipment. There's a much larger group of companies called NUNA. This started in the Northwest Territories, and its main office is, or was anyway, in Yellowknife. I'm not sure now whether it's moved to Edmonton or not, but they have an Edmonton office. They've achieved an average of over 35% Indigenous employment across all their projects in 2018, which is very impressive. It's 51% Inuit ownership and grew out of the diamond mining industry in Alberta, in the Northwest Territories. I'm sort of letting you in a little bit more information about that story. And it's a wholly owned business arm of the Kitamiote Inuits Association. What's interesting about them, besides the fact that they've done lots of work on mining projects, and that's how they got their start, they've expanded from being just in the Northwest Territories. They've seen other opportunities south of the Northwest Territories and even further to the east. They've actually worked as far east as Nova Scotia, of the projects I'm aware of, and they've just got this $1.3 billion, part of this $1.3 billion gold project in Ontario, where they're creating a new gold mine. And they've got a $250 million contract. And they've done something which we'll see repeated with other Indigenous companies, is they formed a partnership, in this case, with another construction company, which probably has some resources in Ontario that they don't necessarily have, so they can deliver this very large contract. I'm not going to talk about Indigenous community mining agreements, but there's a very neat website supported by the federal government. And again, you can see the link at the bottom. And this shows all the active mining agreements across Canada. And so you can see they're different colors, and so they're different types of agreements. And at some point, you might want to look into that because we're emphasizing the sort of EDO opportunities. These mining agreements are usually signed, between band councils or the representatives of the First Nation and a mining company that's hoping to develop a project in the traditional territory of that particular Indigenous community or First Nation. And so it's less relevant to what we're talking about today and to economic development officers. Your involvement with one of these might be providing, if you have the understanding of the sector, some of that experience to bring to the table to your community. I'm going to just show you one. This is for the Cardinal River Coal Mine. This was an agreement between the Alexis Nakota Sioux Nation in Alberta and Teck, quite a large mining company which has a very strong presence in British Columbia. And it's the mine the impact and benefit agreement was came into force in 2000. I think I've got it reversed there. Sorry, 2019, and in 2021, oh no, I've got my mistake. Sorry, the impact and benefits agreement would be older. It's not 2021. It would be sort of in the order of about 2012, and while the mine was operating. But in 2019, they were initially in that year talking about trying to expand the Cardinal River coal mine to actually extend it to mine more coal from a different area. Unfortunately, one of the things that happens with even large companies in this sector is that sometimes you lose the fiscal capability, or the situation isn't right for that operation to go. So they decided to close the operation in 2020. And one of the things that I thought is important here is that because of this impact and benefits agreement, it has positive things at the front end, but at some point all mines come to be mined out and need to close. And this engagement helped Teck engage very effectively with the First Nations you see listed at the bottom there in the last bullet, so that those communities could adjust to the changing economic environment that they were working in, and also perhaps look for opportunities related to the closure and reclamation of the mine. So larger mines in Alberta, we've got steelmaking coal, or what we call metallurgical coal, in the foothills. Let's see if we get, okay. And that extends actually further south than that red circle shows you, a little bit further south. We have thermal coal, which is burned in Alberta to provide electricity. Up until recently, more than 50% of the electricity in Alberta was coming from thermal coal. There are salt mines. These are producing salt for various uses, not just table uses, but also industrial. And then throughout the province, very abundant is sand and gravel. It's sort of pretty well everywhere. You can see this maybe you see my arrow here. You can see there are areas of sand and gravel. That's what all these darker patches are. It's everywhere. The thing about gravel is, though, you don't want to truck it very far because that's quite expensive. And there is energy produced from the oil sands. It's an oil and gas extractive industry. There is mining use as part of that process for not all, but most of the producers there. That isn't in the energy side of extractive industries. It's not mining. So we won't be talking about that today. So mine products. I'm showing sand and gravel first here because while it's the third most important type of mining in Alberta in terms of value of production, the fact it's everywhere means that there are lots of smaller scale but easier to start opportunities. And so I'm going to come back later on, even though it's the third most important industry in the mining sector in Alberta. I'll be coming back to that later. Coal, that's number one. It's been number one for decades. It's been really important, and I'll come back to talk about that more. The salt mine, there's a holding facility for bin, and then you can see the process and the mining. The mining there is done by solution. They actually pipe water down into these beds of salt, these old beds of salt buried beneath the Earth's surface, dissolve the salt, bring it up, and then precipitate it out. And then industrial minerals. There's a wide variety of rocks and minerals that are mined, and I'm going to talk to you a bit about that. Exploration potential. So for Alberta, actually, one of the things that really surprised me when I did this review for this webinar was that the really exciting exploration potential for certain commodities in Alberta. And so I remind you, most mineral deposits are found below the Earth's surface. Sounds not too complicated, but I can look out my window here on Salt Spring. I can see lots of trees. I can count them. I can figure out which ones are worth cutting down to either become firewood or used some other way. But these very difficult deposits, it can be very difficult to find one that's large enough to go into the ground and mine it and make money out of it, because otherwise the company's not going to pursue it. And I've shown this sort of dilemma here with this cartoon at the bottom. where you can see that there are 3 kids and they've got shovels and they're out there and they're just digging through about 6 inches of soil. But boy, maybe I have some jewels I'm going to find. Oh, maybe it's a dinosaur fossil I've hit, or maybe it's some archaeological interesting aspect. And so that's the kind of optimism you need for exploration. But you can see actually they're hitting a rock, and they're going to hit a lot of rocks before they find anything even close to a jewel box. Alberta has a geological survey that's produced some very interesting maps, and this is a complicated one. My daughter, in seeing it, said, hey, this is really actually quite a neat pattern. It's sort of quite artistic. But what the geologist has done have estimated using these different colors, so there's red and there's blue and green, what type of mineral might be found beneath the Earth's surface. Now, they're using geological information and information I would understand to try and make the deduction, but they don't know if there's a mine there. And the interesting thing is, if you see this blue blob here, this is an area where there's potential for diamonds in Alberta. And you see here, there's another blue blob. There's another one over here. It's kind of hard to make up. There's another one here. There are a lot of blue blobs where they think there might be diamonds, and I'll be telling you later more about that. So if we look at the exploration potential in Alberta, there's a large area where diamonds might be found. Now, we know most of the places that diamonds are going to be found will not be economic, but within that area, there's a good potential that there might be a diamond mine. There's uranium up in in the northeast corner. There's a number of uranium mines in Saskatchewan, but so far there's been no uranium mine in Alberta yet. There's potash. Again, there's potash mines in Saskatchewan. That potential extends into Alberta. And there are rare earth elements, so we'll talk a bit more about them. And again, they're in slightly different geology, but in the same area as where you find the uranium. And there's nobody producing rare earth elements in that part of Saskatchewan, Alberta, or Northwest Territories, but there's interesting geological potential, and there's increasing demand for rare earth elements as a high-tech metals. So my fourth reason for talking to you about this today, mining's not well known. Well, why not? Well, it's not taught in the schools usually. Many mines are in remote rural areas, so you don't sort of drive past it. Unfortunately, these industrial sites are, for safety reasons, tend to be restricted. So it's not like driving past your mall and driving into the parking lot. There's going to be fences and other things to make sure that people don't wander onto an industrial site. The other thing is the mining products we use and that we depend upon, by the time it gets to us, it's usually been processed to a metal or a mineral product, and we don't think about where it came from. It doesn't probably have the same impact as a carton of eggs where we can draw that thing. So I'm just going to give you some highlights about the mining sector in Alberta that are a bit more specific. There are 9 coal mines. You might not have known that. There are 3 salt mines. You probably knew there were coal mines. There's 23 quarries and hundreds of sand and gravel pits. The annual value of mining production is about $2.4 billion. The mineral exploration, appraisal, and deposit appraisal, exploration sort of activities is $37 million, and mine developments, and this is in 2019 as well, and mine developments being underway. There was in 2019 it was just over 93 million. And Alberta produces a number of commodities. I've mentioned most of them, but I didn't talk about silica sand. We'll see an example of that. But that gives you a good idea. And just to remember that Canada is the 4th largest exporter of metallurgical coal, or what is used often called coking coal as well, because it's used to produce coke. That's an essential ingredient for the production of steel. And steel is used, you got to remember, it's used in a wide variety of applications, including some very important environmentally friendly applications like a wind turbine. I forget the amount, but every single large wind turbine has an incredible amount of steel that has to be produced, and that steel cannot be produced in any quantity without coke. So we're into questions. If you haven't typed in a question that the 2 moderators can pick up and then relay to me, I ask you, if you have one, to go ahead and ask it. While we're waiting for the first 1 or 2 to come in, or for the moderators to get organized, I just thought I would show you a picture. The picture on the left is a picture of me in Nicaragua. I did a thesis at university. My two interests in geology, real interests, are volcanoes, and you can see a young active volcano in the background called Cerro Negro because it's black mountain. Not the one I was studying in my thesis, but another one I went to see. And then on the right, you can sort of see as a geologist, I was still using colored pencils that time. It's well before the invention of GIS and using computers to produce colored maps and stuff. And you can see some of the other tools I had there. Might even see a hand lens there. It looks like I have a smaller one with a red band there. So over to the moderators, over to Carmel and Paul to handle the questions. And I look forward to what you ask.
Dave, can you give us some idea of what the growth potential has been in mining in Alberta, not only in, let's say, the last 10 years, but projecting forward, what the potential might be?
There's sort of two parts to that. Speaking as a geologist and thinking of what I'll be talking to you a bit later, one diamond mine could sort of almost increase the mining output, value of mining output in the province by 50%. One good-sized diamond mine. So that's not as big as a Caddy in the Northwest Territories, but a sort of average size economic diamond mine. So if I say there's diamond potential there, you find one deposit, suddenly you've increased the value of production by 50%. And we'll talk about a couple other commodities. I mentioned rare earth elements, but also there's lithium brines, and lithium is used in batteries. You've probably heard about that with the Tesla and stuff like that, that they want really high performing batteries. And there's potential in Alberta to start producing lithium from brines. If we look out 10 years from now, that potential could be realized. There's some hurdles, not so much in the resource, because there are lots of lithium brines in the oil fields that could be easily tapped. Is can you recover it economically, and will it be a competitive process, so you're going to be rewarded financially for it? So I would say there's the upside is you can certainly double, the potential to double the value of mineral production and distribute it in a different way around the province to some areas that haven't seen it in the past in significant ways other than sand and gravel quarries. But there's a risk associated with that. So companies have to come in and make major investments to define these resources. And then in the case of with lithium brines, they need to figure out a way of extracting it. I also don't expect Alberta to be the richest province in terms of mineral wealth in Canada. So that's the other side of the coin, is that British Columbia, Saskatchewan, Ontario, and Quebec are probably at even 10 years from now, if things go well in Alberta, I would still expect them to be extracting more mine products and more value than Alberta.
Yeah, there were no other questions, Dave.
Okay, then I will proceed. But thank you. That is a good question, and it goes directly to a couple of things I'll mention later. I did want to mention to you, as economic development officers and interested people in mining for Alberta, that mining opportunities, they're industrial operations, some of them large, some of them small, but they can come with concerns. And so on the left-hand side of your screen, you can see some of the recent information in the news relating to coal mines, and particularly, and they're mentioning open pit coal mines in particular, because these are larger surface disturbances. That would be an example of a big mine in Alberta. On the right, you can sort of see from Cochrane Now, which I think is just sort of an electronic source of media. There's a gravel pit proposed in the area, and there are some people who are opposed to it. One needs to understand the sector, and one needs to appreciate the concerns. And so I'm here today to talk about opportunities. I have a relatively limited time to explain the mining industry and talk about the opportunities. And so I have done other workshops where I've had a whole day where we actually talk about some of these different aspects of mining that can concern communities, or how you can protect the environment, but what are the challenges there. That's not a part of what we're doing. But I would encourage you, if you get involved with as an economic development officer, if you're dealing with a company or you're trying to find things out or you're getting information from the government, ask those tough questions. You know, and sometimes it's the simplest question or the tough ones, but it's important for you as a person looking for opportunities to understand them and to understand both sides. But just be aware that I'm, for this presentation, which I would normally be trying to do a session this face-to-face over a whole day. So it's, I've had to choose specific aspects. Government plays a very major role in both exploration and mining, regulating it. Provincial and territorial governments, provincial or territorial governments, I should say, really, are involved in administering the mineral claims and which are the tenures and regulating exploration activities. They'll generate information to support exploration and attract investment. They permit the mines and the mine development. And in fact, mine development is a critical stage because that sets the path for the mine. And so that's important to have the mine developed in the right way from the start. They enforce safety regulations and assist with mine training. I don't have one from Alberta, but I have just one of the manuals that the BC government puts out for health, safety, and reclamation code for mines in British Columbia. It's quite small text. I don't know if you can sort of get a sense of that. You can sort of see this is just one of the 3 or 4 volumes that the industry would have to refer to in developing a new mine and then running the mine. Those are tied to regulations that have been enacted by the local legislature. And these days in Canada, mines are also required to post reclamation plans, which is how they will reclaim the mine when it's closed. But they also are required usually to post bonds, which is they put money in the bank, which they can't access, but which is held there in case they default on completing the reclamation. Then the government can use that money to reclaim the mines. Federal government has essentially in Confederation, the provinces and territories got responsibility and sort of the benefits, the revenue and taxes from mining. They do have some involvement, obviously, on reserves. They can choose to participate in environmental assessments of large mine proposals where there's an impact on one of the key concerns is where rivers are emptying into the ocean. So they're major fish-bearing rivers, and so they have a responsibility for fishery resources. They also get involved in mining of uranium. Doesn't apply to Alberta, but in Saskatchewan, because of the concerns about safety for uranium and radioactivity, they are involved along with the provincial government related to that. Government assistance can be quite helpful, and certainly as an economic development officer, if you were starting to think of some project, you should think about the Alberta Geological Survey. You should think about the Coal and Mineral Development Unit. They both produce reports. The Coal and Mineral Development Unit produced a report that was very helpful for me that summarizes mineral exploration and mining activities every year. If you were really keen on opportunities, you would look at that and see, oh, I want to see what's been going on in my region in the last year. And so you should think of these agencies as potentially very helpful if you have questions and you want to know something about Alberta that relates to mining. Acts and regulations, so they give the government of Alberta the authority to administer and allocate the agreements that relate to the minerals. So this is allowing Alberta to say, well, we have the subsurface rights here available. You as an individual prospector or as an exploration company can acquire those rights by applying for it, by paying a fee. And so there's a number of other things they do. And there are several regulations I list there. We're not, at this point, that's more detail than we really need to go beyond. Their access to land is important to not just mineral exploration and mining, because if there's an area where there's potential for diamonds, they would like to be able to explore in that area and see if there is really a diamond mine there. But to actually do anything other than walking on the ground as a prospector and carrying a rock hammer and not disturbing the surface, you require what we call a tenure agreement, or what some people might call a claim in a different jurisdiction. And it gives you ownership for coal or metallic and industrial minerals, or petroleum and natural gas, or oil sands. And we're obviously just talking about the first two here. These different types of tenure can overlap, which can be has not tended to be, I don't think, a major problem in Alberta, but is an aspect that needs to be taken account of by the tenure holders. No tenure is allowed on lands held by the federal government on behalf of First Nations, national parks, lands owned by individual, lands owned by companies, where it's freehold rights. And for more information, you could go online to the links we list at the end. So the rest of this presentation, until I get right to the end, is about the life cycle of mining. And it's just a way of thinking from the actual initial discovery to the final closure. So we have prospecting and early exploration, what I tend to call early exploration. We have mineral exploration. We have mine development. So I should have said, if I go back here, sorry, I should give you previous. So the first one is obviously two prospectors. You can see there, they got their rain gear, their trucks parked out, 50 meters away, or, a couple kilometers away, and they're hiking around. They're carrying sort of grub holes, rock hammers, so they can dig the soil away and look at the rocks. And they look like they've been doing it for a while, they're quite experienced guys. Mineral exploration, once you get into mineral exploration, you start thinking about drilling to collect, and I'll show you some pictures of drills and a couple pictures of the drill core they get. Just think of it as, it's like if you had a birthday cake, if you stuck a straw into the birthday cake and the birthday cake was layered, you would pull the straw out and you would see the layering, including that cherry layer in the middle of this red. You would see and you'd understand what the rocks were. If the cherry layer happened to be copper rich, you'd say, oh, I may have hit a deposit. I just need to drill it more to see if there's enough of it to mine. Mine development, that could be going underground. This is like an underground tunnel, and it's going down underground to sort of access the minerals or the metals and bring it out with a minimum amount of the rock around it. And then you go to mining, and you actually, if it's an underground mine, you'll build a head frame like this. That'd be a potash mine from Saskatchewan I'm showing for that head frame. So you might have seen that if you were driving through Saskatchewan in the Regina area, you might have seen one of those. And then we get to mine closure and reclamation. And one of the really positive things that's happened in the last 40 years is that companies are on their own becoming more progressive about reclaiming their sites, but far more importantly in Canada and other developed jurisdictions, there are regulations and an understanding of how to do this properly. It's not just a matter of throwing grass. You want to have native grasses, native habitation being growing, coming back there. So, and so I call that the mining life cycle, because you're finding something, you're exploring to see if it can be developed economically. You then try and develop it, you mine it, and then you return it as best you can to the use it had before. Some mines, like a limestone quarry, that's actually fairly easy to do. Some large metal mines, there's complexity there that it can take a while to close and reclaim that site. Important thing to know is Indigenous business opportunities exist through the spectrum. I know some Indigenous prospectors in BC. In some cases, the mine closure and reclamation is a perfect setting for an Indigenous business, because they're looking for contractors who are local, who can do sort of intermittent work, because they might be sampling water coming out of a mine site every 2 weeks or something like that, or every week. But in between, there's no work for them. And so they don't want to keep staff at the mine site to do that if they can do it. And what would be the other thing if it were an Indigenous business that might make it appealing for them to hire you? Well, it's if it's on your traditional land, or given your background, you'll have a perspective that may be much more proactive or much more concerned about the impact of the work you're doing to protect the environment and to do it diligently. Why explore for minerals? It's all around us. You know, as I say, we tend not to think of it. I can reach over here and rap on this wall. That's wallboard. It's gypsum. It's like 90%. It's got some paper on it. It's got some covering on it, but it's actually reconstituted gypsum in the middle of it that creates the walls of many of the buildings and rooms that we use. And so we don't think of it. We think of it as wallboard. We think of it as a sort of probably an industrial product. And as we go into solar panels and electric vehicles, the demand for minerals is increasing. There's in an electric vehicle versus a regular car, I forget the statistic, but there's way more copper wiring in an electric vehicle than there is in a traditional gas-driven car. So we are increasingly dependent on minerals. So we are, because of our advanced society, therefore mining is here to stay. Obviously, we need to do mining in the safest and the best way environmentally. So mineral exploration path. So we're talking about early mineral exploration and then advanced mineral exploration. We're going to see the prospector out there. Prospecting, it's now becoming harder, but certainly not impossible to find deposits on surface. So we're seeing fewer prospectors throughout Canada as we're forced to go to using geochemistry and use geophysics. These are two different ways of collecting information that tell us about where you might find these mineral deposits below the surface. And then the drilling, which is the actual test. And if we were thinking about how this might apply to Alberta and other parts of Canada, this type of exploration I'm showing is sort of more what you'd be doing if you're exploring for metals, critical minerals, rare earths. For things like some of the industrial minerals, you do have to do sampling, but you don't have to do this really more complex exploration because they form these deposits. The other deposits often are in beds, and you have a better sense of where they are. You just have to test them for quality. So on the left, you can see we're going to be talking about early exploration first. How does exploration start? It's an idea. Somebody has an idea that, oh, I should go look here, or I should drill this hole here, or yes, there's a potential for a diamond mine in Alberta. One way of thinking of this, it's sort of the same process for a geologist. It's moose hunting. If I'm going to go hunting for a moose, what am I going to think about? Well, I'm going to look for an environment where moose are known to inhabit. Maybe there's a good area in the rural or northern area near you where there are swamps and grasses and open areas for the moose to inhabit. So you look for the right kind of environment. You could also sort of stake out an area and look and see if you can see a moose. That area you might not be able. It might be in an area where you're not able to hunt it, but you know in that region if you see a moose, it's going to be a good area to hunt. You can also just ask people, where should I go looking for moose hunting? And so you get some experience from somebody else. In the mine context, if you have an existing mine, one of the key places people explore is near an existing mine. Even if it's closed, it doesn't mean that the ability to find another one in that area is fully tested. If you're a geologist, you're going to look for similar types of rocks. And obviously, we in brand new areas, prospecting is just wandering through the area and trying to find something of interest. One of the things is most people, if they know where to find a big moose, aren't really telling other hunters. And so at this phase, you have to be aware. The companies have gotten better, but at this phase, if you have a good idea, you don't necessarily want other people to get there ahead of you, so you're not necessarily talking about it. And so you may be more secretive than one might expect. Prospectors, this is a prospector, I guess a couple of prospectors, because it's an active one, and his father out in the bush up in northwestern British Columbia. And they've discovered many metal and industrial mineral showings. they sort of hike through the bush, they walk new logging roads, they follow creek beds. Typically now they'd have a rock hammer or a GPS locator, a gold pan, and they would be using a computer when they would go back to their house. And they're collecting samples to look for evidence of where they might find it. And they're not expecting, obviously, to develop the mine. They're going to sell it to a company to develop. So they make money by finding something that has some, is going to give an exploration geologist an idea that they should work there. Who are doing this as companies? Well, they're small companies. We tend to call in the industry, call them junior companies. And they have several to tens of full-time employees. They often have a single office. Canada is a worldwide global center for mineral exploration. And we're also a global center for junior companies. They also can be found in Australia and other parts of the world. But if you were to pick the exploration capital of the world, it's Vancouver. If you're going to pick companies that are likely to be doing exploration in junior companies that are doing exploration in Alberta, they're likely going to be based in Vancouver. They might eventually open an office in Alberta if they sort of get on a roll. Their shares trade for cents to dollars, usually more on the cents, 15 cents, 10 cents, 50 cents. When they break $1, they're usually quite happy. It means they've been successful. They do not own a mine, so they have no source of income. They are just spending money that investors have given them. And many of them don't exist for more than 5 to 10 years. If we look at companies that operate in Alberta, have operated in Alberta in the last 4 or 5 years, we have Prism, E3 Metals, and Sure Gold, and you'll see something about them later in the program, just a little bit. But they are sort of examples of front-end junior companies trying to develop a resource and have the optimism that their idea is going to be the one that's going to make a return on investment. Interestingly enough, because these companies may turn the property over, but if I go back, sorry, it's just Sure Gold Inc. was actually has done a lot of exploration for diamonds in Saskatchewan. They have a deposit there that looks like it has a fairly good chance of becoming a diamond mine in Saskatchewan, the first one in Saskatchewan. And they did a lot of exploration in the Buffalo Hills sort of general area in northwestern Alberta. But that was, as we'll hear later, almost about 15 years ago or a bit more. They have since, just in the last year, even though they're made good progress, they've had to sort of reorganize themselves being a junior company, and they have a new name, Star Diamond Corporation. And again, that's sort of something you will see with junior companies. So what are they going to do as an exploration company? They're going to go out there, they're going to collect soil, till, silt, or rock samples, anything that can give some indication that there's some copper in that material that might relate to much larger, usually a much stronger concentration below the surface to make it, and a larger volume to make it economic. There can be airborne surveys flown, which is shown on the, and that allows you to assess certain characteristics that you can look into beneath the Earth's surface and cover a fairly large area without having to go on the ground to see if you can identify areas that you might want to do more work. If you have a reason to do more work, or you're having a lot of success with your sampling, you also might do a ground geophysical survey. That's what these two people on the right here are doing. And there it's a sort of equivalent, but because you're right on the ground, it gives you a better capacity to look 200, 300 meters beneath the surface. In this particular survey, they're looking for minerals that conduct electricity. So they generate, if you send a current, you'll see a follow-up current to it. Drilling is key to many discoveries, and just some number of drills. They will drill much of the drilling in areas with road access. In parts of Alberta and British Columbia will be done, before the snow comes, because it becomes a challenge. But there are certain parts of northern Alberta and Saskatchewan and Manitoba where actually it can be preferable to drill in the winter. Here's geologist logging drill core. So he's got a notebook there. He's recording notes. He's looking at, say, he was looking for gold. He'd be looking for little specks of gold, but he'd also be looking for minerals like fool's gold, pyrite that might be associated with the gold, and decide, okay, I haven't seen any gold because that's a pretty rare to find visible gold, but I'm going to analyze these rocks. And they'll start doing environmental studies with Expiration. The idea is to produce baseline data before there's been any real significant disturbance. So that could be used if the project goes ahead to become a mine. One of the examples of a company that an Indigenous company that could be doing work for mining companies, unfortunately, I couldn't find enough to know if they've done it. They're doing exactly what you would need for a lot of mining companies in northern Alberta and certainly northern Saskatchewan and Manitoba. They say they're market leaders in providing remote camp services. Usually what you mean by remote is not road accessible, but some of them could be, and related or support assistance. And here they're talking about the Wood Buffalo region. I've just told you that in that region, there was quite a bit of exploration for diamonds. They started in 2002. That was about when there was the peak, about the peak of the diamond exploration. So I suspect they've done some. It's a joint venture company, and you can see the people are participating. And you can see quite often with, particularly at the start, an Indigenous company may have a partner that's not an Indigenous company, but has access to skills or clients to work with. So Alberta's potential for mining new commodities, which goes back to that question. It's an emerging potential for rare earth elements, diamonds, and lithium brines. And I'm going to talk more about that. There's known potential for uranium, potash, and metals. The metals are in various locations around the province. I'm just going to talk about the emerging potential. And there you can see the rare earth elements and uranium in the northeast corner, the diamonds, which I showed you before. Lithium brines could even be larger than that, but you can see there's Edmonton and sort of extending almost all the way up to the BC border. And then potash, the potash deposits in Saskatchewan, the rocks that host them come on to Alberta, but nobody's developed a mine there. There are, as I said, people have found a uranium occurrence up, I think it's right in about here, and it's a significant deposit, but it didn't have enough uranium at a high enough concentration for the company to go ahead and say we can develop it. They weren't going to they didn't have enough positive information to raise the hundreds of millions or more dollars necessary to develop a mine. Doesn't mean that deposit might not become a mine in the future, because they might do more drilling and make the deposit larger and find a richer zone, or the price of uranium could go up, in which case it changes the scenario. Well, diamonds. I'm going to tell you this diamond story that does relate to me. Remember, I said I would tell you about diamond potential for Alberta. Well, when I was sort of first in university, we knew that diamonds were associated with parts of the earth where you had very old Precambrian shield type rocks. You know, some of you have heard of the Canadian Shield. So this is the outline of the Canadian Shield where it is exposed. And you can see that most of those areas, not in Scandinavia, but most of those areas have diamonds associated with them. So we knew as geologists that you should be able to find diamonds in Canada, but we only really knew about a few diamonds, and they were not economic, in Arkansas down here. So Canada has no diamond mines. Why should, it looks for some reason, we don't know why, even though we think geologically there should be diamonds there, we should be. And the one thing that I learned later in the 80s and early 90s, De Beers was a major diamond producer and had all the large diamond mines in South Africa, was actually very secretively doing some diamond exploration up here. So they also believed that idea. Well, surprise, Canada has diamond mines. On this map, you can see 4 or 5 of them, 3 in the Northwest Territories, including Caddy, which was the first one found in Canada that became a mine. First real diamond deposit found in Canada as well. One in Nunavut and one, the Victor mine in Ontario. There are actually 2 other ones that have opened and closed, 2 smaller ones that Caddy has outlived thin. Well, what if we think about Alberta? Well, we're not that far away. Well, first, here's the Saskatchewan Shore Gold diamond field where they believe they have a deposit and they think they can turn that into a mine. In Alberta, they've not been very generous to Alberta because, but they're showing, yes, Buffalo Hills, Birch Mountains, and then some found down here right on the border with BC. So there are diamonds in BC, in Alberta. What I didn't know until I did my research here was they knew there was a diamond found in West Central Alberta in 1958. And sort of discounted how important it was. In 1992, a prospector found microdiamonds in stream sediments. Remember I said you could sample sediments. And so, oh, yeah, okay. But people didn't really get going until they realized that there were kimberlites, which is a special type of rock associated some of the time with diamonds, but diamonds are always associated with that type of rock. And so as of 2015 in Alberta, 55 kimberlitic pipes have been discovered, not all of them containing diamonds, and diamonds have been recovered from them, but not enough to say, well, and this is just showing you that diamonds actually have, remember those little blue areas? They have quite a bit of extensive coverage in potential places to look in Alberta. So the rush for diamonds was 1995 to 2001. The company spent about $61 million, but they didn't find anything that could move forward to a mine development stage. Just looking, most economic diamond pipes have values of 400 million to 4 billion. So and they can operate for more than, approximately 20 years, or sometimes go quite a bit longer. One mine, albeit a very rich mine and large mine, Caddy, contributed over 5 billion to Canada's GDP between 1996 and 2011. And it was employing about 1,200 people in 2011. And there you can just see some of the companies. Apex is based in Alberta. These other ones are either based in Vancouver. Shore Gold is based in Vancouver. I don't know. These other two could be based in Toronto or Vancouver, or even outside of Canada. And there's the Star Diamond. Remember, they changed their name. So that's diamonds. Well, lithium, okay, it's an exciting new mineral product. If you're Elon Musk, he'd say, well, I need lots of lithium and I need it tomorrow. Most of the lithium this mine comes from salty lakes, primarily in South America. And these are salts at surface. Well, what people are looking at in Alberta is oil field brines. You already have the piping system to extract the brines. They've dissolved naturally some of the lithium that's contained by the adjacent sedimentary rocks. And you see the uses there for lithium. And it's identified in the current Canadian Minerals and Metal Plan as one of the 31 critical minerals that's on Canada's list. So it's particularly essential to lowering emissions as we go to being more careful with emissions and a greener society. And it's also important for energy security. We've seen, hadn't thought of this before, but with the pandemic, if you don't supply yourself locally, you are at risk of what happens internationally. And so that applies to vaccines for the pandemic, but might apply to sources of critical minerals for not just for Canada, but for some of our allies who don't have the potential for those critical minerals. Oh, I should go back, sorry. Sorry. This is just to say that you read the thing, a huge opportunity. Alberta oil fields could give rise to lithium industry fueled by electric cars. The front end, they're like the kids digging with a shovel. They're really optimistic. At this point, we know it's exciting, but we also know that it's there's no guarantee. There's a great deal of risk at this stage. But if you were to read some articles in the media, you would think, oh, it can happen tomorrow, and it's going to happen for sure. This is just showing the distribution of the brines in more detail on the right. You can see here I'm sampling it from a well. That's what it looks like. It looks obviously just like water. So it's in sufficiently concentrated that they think they can extract it and make money off it and sell it into the marketplace. But actually, you know, it's not, it doesn't, as far as I know, it looks more benign than some other things that get mined. Not that I'm an expert in that. So they don't even know if they can actually do it, but they've been very good. And those are the three junior companies. You see, one of them's changed their name, and it's a junior company in the last last year, I think. And they have a conceptual idea of what the production facility would be like. So it's conceptual, it's early. It's like a high-tech company that says, well, we can design a game that does this and everybody's going to buy it. We're going to make, you know, $1 million or more. So they're going to extract it, usually from existing oil wells. They're going to bring in and sort of process it initially. Then they'll take and they'll redistribute the brine back to where it came from, but with the lithium extracted to a certain concentration, and then they'll process it, and then they'll have a lithium salt, I think they call it, which they can do it. Conceptual, early stage. As far as I know, nobody's demonstrated that they can do that. You know, it's very unlikely to demonstrate they can do it conceptually. But they're trying to attract investment because there is the potential that this is going to be one of the key sources for lithium in Canada and perhaps worldwide. Advanced coal exploration. So we're now into advanced exploration. Alton Coal, it's an Australian company. They're proposing a new mine. They would like to produce 6 million tons of the metallurgical coal that gets shipped overseas to be making steel, the coking coal that's so critical. And they have approved drilling exploration activities to continue to firm up their project. There are several exploration programs that are advanced, and they're looking for phosphate, sand, and heavy minerals. I don't think we need to focus too much on that. When we talk about exploration project characteristics, they're early stage exploration, like the figure on the left with the prospectors and junior companies just sort of doing some early work. They're generally 5 to 50 people in the field. They're junior companies and sometimes larger companies. They could be spending $50,000 to maybe millions of dollars annually. Prospectors would be spending $5,000, $10,000, $3,000. And nobody's paying them anything. They're investing it to try and see if they can find something to sell. They're often summer field programs, particularly in areas with road access. And they do have an opportunity to provide require exploration services and to provide community benefits. I would say these are often too small to be super significant in that aspect, but they sometimes do. But they certainly need to have that interaction with the local First Nations, and that's required through government permits, that there's consultation with the local Indigenous communities related to it. And they have very generally limited environmental impacts. If we go to advanced, it tends to hundreds of people. It's junior companies and larger companies. It's up to hundreds of millions of dollars spent over years. And the field programs are often for multiple years because it's going to take you 3 or 4 years to at a minimum to identify a metal deposit you can mine. And there are significant opportunities to provide exploration services and sign benefit agreements if you're an Indigenous community. They also are going to come with more significant environmental impacts, but nothing that would compare usually with what you have with mine development or mining. So we're now going to talk about mine development. And so it's still doing environmental assessments. Often you need to take a bulk sample. This is actually from Saskatchewan, showing the Shore Gold's or Star Diamonds facility there. And you can see all the rock that they've taken out of drill holes, large drill holes, that they've sampled to see how much is in those for the amount of diamonds, to see whether they have something that's economic. Oops, sorry. And well, then you get into I'll go back, sorry. Then you get into government permits, lots of them, lots of involvement with the government, lots of meetings and procedures to go through with community consultation. You have to do economic feasibility studies to justify people risking money, and you have to raise that money. And any one of those things could lead to a delay. And as you'll hear later, the delay could end up stalling or terminating the project. What makes it economic? It's the type of the mineral, it's the market price, its location, its accessibility, its size, the sort of the value of the overall resource. Infrastructure can make a difference. Some deposits have been sterilized until there are roads or airstrips in the area. Distance from the markets and supply points, both shipping stuff out and stuff coming in, transportation costs. The regulatory regime can sometimes be, some jurisdictions think they can get more money than a mine can support, therefore the mine can't start. It's now goes through the lens of, for investors and companies advising investors, is it environmentally safe and socially responsible mines can be happening? Because that leads to more predictability in terms of the outcome. If you're operating that way, particularly in Canada, then there's a higher chance that you'll be successful with it. And you need a qualified workforce. If you don't have that, you can't go ahead. There are 2 industrial mineral development projects. One, the Firebag, it's looking at high purity surface sand, which can be used as frac sand for hydraulic fracturing for oil and gas. Another one is a large construction aggregate quarry, and they're going through the process of establishing the resource they have, at least in the first case, but also working with the government to get the permits to proceed. At the same time, they're trying to make sure they have enough funding to actually do what they want to do. Here's another mining project north of Grand Prairie. They were drilling in 2008 to 2011. They found this large iron deposit with a lot of contained vanadium pentoxide, a source of vanadium, another critical, probably a critical mineral, but likely an important minor metal that gets used. It's used in particular types of steel and products. And they took a bulk sample. It's kind of a dark photo that I got from them, but off the web. But they took 11,000 tons out of here, and they've stockpiled it somewhere on this site so they can use it for process testing. They think it's going to take $300 million, or did back in about 2016, to develop as a mine. They submitted a proposal. They were going to enter the environmental process. It had not happened as of 2020. So 4 years later, they sort of stalled, and I don't know why they've stalled, but something has made it. And from this indication, I don't think it's government process. I think it's they're not. The market's not sure whether this is worth investing in at this point. $300 million. And that's my personal opinion. The company and the people who know it better may be able to better explain it. I shouldn't say I'm not a representative of the government. I'm a private consultant. I'm not a representative of Cando. I'm just sharing my expertise. And so that was a personal opinion and not based on enough information. But for whatever reason, they haven't followed their original plans for it. Steelmaking coal, we know that there are a number of projects that have been proposed for new coal mines. There is a demand for coking coal. The prices have been improving lately. You can see there it's been up. It's up to $128 per ton. Might go as high as $147 in next year if that Coal Investing News report is correct. But we don't know. I'm going to show you a map. But when you see information that comes from something that says investor or investing news, be aware that they're trying to attract investors to read their site. They're likely to be very positive usually about what they're profiling. So think of them as being on the optimistic side as to what the coal price will be in 2022, optimistic side as to how likely a project to go ahead. So it's just not a filter you need. Doesn't mean necessarily what they're saying is wrong. It just may mean that they're more optimistic with their projections than somebody else would be. So here's an Alberta Geological Survey map. It's a little detailed to look at. I haven't simplified it, but Grand Cache is an operating metallurgical coal mine. Vista is a thermal coal mine, the only one in the foothills. And then the third coal mine is, I think it's right in here. It's shown as being under development. It's now called the Vista. And they're in the belt that I showed for the steelmaking coal. And then you can see that, and those are, the Alan one project is down in here. And there, you can see the mines over here. These are all the thermal coal mines. So we'll see some pictures of them afterwards. So here's the Grassy Mountain. It's a proposed coal mine. Could employ 385 people, produce 4.5 million tons of metallurgical coal, last for 24 years. So those are all critical criteria. The coal would be shipped through Vancouver to international customers, most of them in Asia. They're currently in a joint federal provincial regulatory review because the federal government has some concerns about waterways, I think in this case that go into the United States, and possibly others that they're enable them to participate. And these are lengthy processes. If approved, they are followed by regulators reviewing and approving the detailed mines and procedures. Remember about all the regulations that I was talking about earlier. And there's considerable community involvement, including Indigenous communities, and that's why I put the Piikani Nation there. So now we're into mining. We've gone through exploring, developing it, now we're into mining. One needs to remember to get there for a metal mine of the 1,000 properties where you had a 10-year agreement or you staked it, as we call it in BC. Maybe you had hundreds of mineral exploration projects developed. You might have had several mine development projects. Often out of that number, you get one or more metal mines. It's like, often they say 1,000 to 1, but it sort of depends on the area you're in and how well it's been tested before. That's high risk to get to that final payback of a mine. Senior companies, they get involved with this at this stage. And you can see there hundreds to tens of thousands of full-time employees, multiple offices, producing mines, and then the ability to actually smelt or refine or power plants related to them. Their stocks trade for tens of dollars or more usually. And Teck is now out of Alberta, or is in the process of getting out of Alberta with their one coal mine, but Westmoreland and TransAlta have coal mines there. Coal mining, there's 9 mine sites producing a lot of marketable coal. 6 surface mines for the generating electricity. I put this picture in first. The words are important. The Alberta government has been receiving about $20 to $25 million in royalties from these coal mines, so that helps the overall government budget. But the other one is I saw this photograph of a person holding coal and all this coal dust on them. You don't see, I've never seen that. We have 9 operating coal mines in British Columbia. I've been to all of them, although not recently, and it's all mechanized equipment. There's no shovels and picks anymore. You just don't, the person might have some coal dust on their pants, but it's sort of I was just intrigued to see an old image. And that's what it looks like now. So here's Grand Cache, large open pit, still making coal. It's temporarily closed, care and maintenance. It's COVID-19 has affected a number of mines across Canada. And this is one of the mines that it's had some impact. It's also been facing some other challenges, I think, as well. There's a coal processing plant, so associated with Grand Cache. So that's where they clean the coal and get it ready to ship it and remove any rock that's been captured in the mining. In the background, you can see where they've reclaimed old waste piles and recontoured them and reseeded them. These are all waste materials, and they're reclaiming as they go, which is excellent. This is a company which I don't know, again, whether they've been working with in the mining sector a lot. Certainly they in Alberta, they certainly list that they have that capacity. They're quite a large company. They have a number of Indigenous partners based in Alberta, but I couldn't find concrete evidence of how much work they've done in Alberta. But that would be the example of somebody who could be contracting. Some mines could choose to contract even some aspects of the actual mining. Here's 6 thermal coal mines, and just seeing that they're large operations. It's called strip mining. So they dig down through a little bit of soil, through some of the overlying rock to get to the coal there. They take all the rock and the soil and they stockpile it. After they finish mining, they then redeposit the rock and the soil so it can be returned to its previous use. There's an example where you can sort of see the coal at Highvale. So the black's the coal. This is the rock, and the soil will probably be stockpiled somewhere else. Maybe that's the soil back in there, I'm not sure. And you can see that I don't have something for scale. This is huge equipment. I mean, this is, I don't know, 5 people high, this drag line. Congratulations here in this mine. 21 years without a lost time accident. I don't know the statistics for Alberta, but in Saskatchewan, it's actually safer in terms of lost time to work at a mine in Saskatchewan than at a government desk. That's pretty safe. Thermal coal power plants, there are currently 5 in Alberta. I mentioned that they provide quite a bit of power. Canada's phasing out traditional coal-fired electricity. In Alberta, they're going to use gas at least to replace some of that electricity, if not all of it, because gas, as you can see on the bottom here, produces significantly less emissions if you think of it in that case as emissions from a car. I mentioned already that post-mine closure work, well, these are mines, I think it's 7 mines, sorry, or 6 mines, 6 thermal coal mines. These are going to be closing. And I would say the contractors will probably be doing some of this post-mine closure work, and certainly Indigenous contractors should be considered. Industrial minerals, a lot of them in Alberta. The map is older, but it shows you that all the places that there were quarries in 1991, and a number of those are still operating. Some of them are deposits that have not been developed, and a whole variety of things. Salt, I mentioned it was mined. Here's some quarries for limestone, and again, spread around the province. Here's an Indigenous example, the Muskeg Valley Quarry, Hammerstone. They took that from some of the Indigenous use of stone, and they're producing limestone for use in roads, and apparently their limestone results in a 30% reduction in gravel, which is environmentally a smaller footprint. You have amylite, it's being mined in one location. Yeah, should get ready to questions. Yeah.
Yeah, so we do have a question, and I just wanted to be mindful of the time so that we're aware.
Right.
I'm just going to pull up the question really quick, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Okay, so we have from Michael Burial. Sorry if I messed up your last name. While tenures are not allowed on First Nations land, will First Nations still need to get agreements to explore the grounds?
They need to work with the federal government on that because it's a federal government process, and so what I should do is research that and get back, because I need to know it for Alberta, and I'm familiar with provincial and territorial tenure processes, but not with the federal. So we can find that out. So if he or she can provide an email address, we will find that out for you. It's part of the reason I'm equivocating is the little bit I do know is it seems to be more complex in some ways, different from a reserve in one location with a particular Indigenous community versus one in another province. So that's why I can't give a simple answer to that.
All right. Well, thank you, Michael, for your question. If you leave your email, we will be sure to get back to you.
Shall I keep going, or do you want to?
Did anybody else have any questions they want to share in the chat box? If not.
So I'll try and finish here by, with the aggregate sectors, sand and gravel pits everywhere, lots of consumption. The average Albertan uses about 10 to 15 tons for in the equivalent of it, in the sense that they're building roads for them, they're building under footings for houses and stuff like that. There's approximately 4,120 full-time or equivalent jobs in the sector, and there were 216 establishments producing it, and there are, look at that, over 2,600 pits. It's everywhere, so that's good. There's a bit more information there about it. They are also the simplest mines to operate, generally speaking, and usually the easiest mines to reclaim. Remember, even with a sand and gravel pit, no business can be successful without expertise. Kind of interesting, the Alberta Geological Survey produces a map, and it shows where you can find Alberta sand and gravel deposits. It's online, it's digital. You can go around, zoom around, and get to your region to find out what deposits are nearby, and then you want to do some research to see which ones might already be producing and be competitors. So now we're going to go just to look quickly at mine closure and reclamation. And so it's, again, Indigenous business opportunities. This is an two portions of an aggregate pit that have been reclaimed. So one to wetlands, one to grasslands, and typically trying to get to the former use as a natural area or agriculture. It's most common in for these aggregate pits. Here's one, and I liked it, Hazlet pit here. You see, this is where they started in this area here. They've since mined all the way along here, but they've been replacing the soil as they go. So this is just a strip here where they're mining here. They've excavated and placed soil there. They'll put it back and then they'll keep moving in this direction. So that's ongoing active reclamation, which we like to see. Here's a coal mine near High Valley, the sort of predecessor mine in that area. They're close to finishing. The reclamation began in 1962, but they didn't have the same regulations then. They're finally getting around to it. But this is taken from the government website. Reclaiming a site like Whitewood Coal Mine located north of Waban can take decades to complete. Well, that's a long-term process and could have a long-term contract associated with it. And here's some more coal mine reclamation. Here they're using municipal waste from Edmonton to produce a more viable organic layer, soil layer on the top. There's a standalone company within the Thomas group of companies that probably has the capacity to do reclamation work as well as other ones. Again, I don't know how much mining the work they've done, but they have the capacity there to do that kind of work. So learn your ABCs of mining. Well, this is directed at you, EDOs in the audience, and hopefully you'll find it helpful. I have sort of mentioned at least in these a couple of them. So first, changing commodity prices. Rising commodity prices, you can get investment dollars to, if they're rising for diamonds, you can go out there and have a next cycle of exploration to find that diamond mine in Alberta. More stable prices for some products like sand and gravel because there's ongoing demand. And so the prices they only fluctuate if suddenly you have no sand and gravel pits in the region of your territory, your region of your community. And so they have trucked from quite a bit further away, in which case the price goes up considerably. Falling commodity prices, well, it's doom and gloom, and you can't raise money and people lose their optimism. This is very equivalent to fur prices and trapping. You know, you've got a trap line, you've been selling silver fox for the last 5 years. You're out there trapping it this winter, and then you go to sell it at one of these market auctions, and you're in a slump. Sometimes you can't even sell it for a price that you will let it go. And so it's not the only sector that has these, well, we see it with the oil and gas industry. Just have to be aware that has a tremendous impact on mining activity. Promotion is required to develop new resources. That promotion has to come from the governments that are concerned. It needs to come from the mineral exploration mining companies. It needs to come from investors, and it needs to come at least support. I wouldn't say necessarily promotion, but the Indigenous and other communities can play a role in saying, well, yeah, no, we will benefit from this if it's done the right way. And so just something to remember. It takes time to find, permit, build a major mine. I've said that. These are the minimum times for a major mine. 3 years to explore and define a resource, 2 or 3 years to get a mine permit. Construction can take 2 years. That's minimum. Big mine take considerably longer. If you're lucky, you have a window of opportunity with investment funds available, the mine gets developed and opens. If you're a lot less lucky, and that might affect a couple of projects we're talking about, it could slow down, or it can stall, or it can stop and not restart. And there could be multiple reasons for it, not just commodity prices. It could be a competitor coming online and just, you feel that you're not gonna be able to sell enough of your commodity. And it could be some environmental concern which you can't address. And the government says, well, you need to address it may be so costly that the mine is no longer permittable. Well, thanks for attending. We will be posting a list of mining information sources and this slide deck, actually with a couple of slides I've not chosen to use on the Cando website. And I think do you have a last question there, Carmel?
I don't have any questions in the chat box right now, but I did want to remind everybody that there will be a follow-up email. And if you do complete the survey, you will be entered into the draw, and there'll be 2 chances to win a $400 gift card.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. It's been a pleasure to meet you virtually. Good luck with your endeavors.
All right, thank you, Dave, and everybody for attending.
Have a great day, everybody.
It was enjoyable. I only got to listen to about 3/4 of it. I had a speaker problem. It was very interesting.
Oh, good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Are you from Alberta?
Yeah, it's not from Alberta. I manage the oil and gas operations for the Stonies.
Oh, yeah. Oh, good.
Okay, and I also look at the gravel pit that we're planning on the Stony lands here. We should be getting a license here or a permit to operate within the next 30 days.
Oh, well, I should add you to our webinar. Do you want a little bit of profile about that or not?
Yeah, we should.
Yeah, if you want to write down my email, you could send me some information. I'll put it in there if you want.
Okay, actually, your email is going to come over to us.
Okay, sure, yeah. So yeah, you think about that. But anyway, one of the things, if I compare Alberta to Saskatchewan or British Columbia, the 2 adjacent provinces, I have more examples of Indigenous communities interacting with the mining sector than in Alberta. And it's partially because the sector is smaller in Alberta, but it's also, I think that those 2 jurisdictions have more Indigenous communities that have thought about taking advantage of mining economic development opportunities in their area. Oh, and can we still do this, Paul?
Got about 20 seconds.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm glad I asked. Nice to meet you. And yeah, I look forward to hearing from you if you think it's worth doing. But anyway, thank you for your response. Bye. Have a good day.
Thank you all. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Paul.